Todd King with the Accident Recovery Team.
I'm Sean Brennan, the Accident Recovery Team.
We are a personal injury law firm in Wichita, Kansas. We do have a regional reach, but our offices are here, 833 North Waco in Wichita. Being a personal injury law firm, we do focus our practice in those areas of personal injury. Before we get too far into the podcast, let's review. If somebody wants to contact us directly, you can reach us at 267team.com on our website or toll free at 1-866-267-TEAM. Sean, what all do we cover?
You know, we do, Todd, you do work comp. You do a ton of work comp, one of the busiest work comp attorneys in the state of Kansas. We have another arm of the firm that does all manner of personal injuries. So that's car wrecks, slip and falls, medical malpractice, products liability, a pretty broad spectrum.
We have been partners for a long time.
Long time. 10 plus years and worked together for 5 years before that, give or take.
And the Accident Recovery Team started in approximately 2000 as a firm. We've been around changing ownership and whatnot, but we've been around a long time.
Yeah.
A podcast. So obviously we get a lot of questions every day from potential clients and existing clients, and we try to embark on different mediums that we can use to answer some of those questions. We do that through Facebook, we do that online, chat service and things like that, but we thought maybe a podcast would be another avenue where we could address some of those things.
You know, I think what's going to be cool about doing a podcast is you're so often limited to just giving snippets of information. You don't have a whole lot of time. But some of these things take some more time, and I think the podcast will give us more time. I think the other thing that's going to be cool is that we are going to identify some guests that we can bring in to maybe provide some perspective and some expertise that is a little bit beyond our role as lawyers. You know, we're hoping to be able to bring in some people with who are in the insurance industry, some people who are in the body shop industry, some people in the medical field who can kind of give that perspective on it. And I think the podcast will enable us to go a little bit more in depth to provide some better explanation for folks.
I think that's right. And the inherent problem in trying to answer questions is if you haven't yet been injured in an accident, there isn't a compelling reason to be seeking information.
Yeah, right. Right.
Once you're involved in an accident, then there's an overwhelming need to seek information. And we can provide that through the podcast, as you say, not just through information we provide, but maybe bring in some other folks. And we've identified some of those people.
Yeah. You know, the hope is going to be that even if you're not in an accident, there's things you need to know when you go buy an auto insurance policy, for example. There's things you need to know when you go buy a homeowner's policy. And when you're buying those products, you're probably not necessarily thinking, well, how is this going to benefit me down the road if I get into an accident or if someone makes a claim? And so the hope in doing this podcast is that we can identify some of those issues for people now when they're making some of those purchasing decisions so they'll be in a better spot later if something were to happen.
You know, there was a time in the legal community where a successful law firm, the formula was to diversify, to have a bunch of different attorneys that do different things, a full service type firm. And that sometimes works. It by comparison, you described us once accurately, I think, as a specialized boutique firm in that we focus on and specialize in one field.
Right.
And so we have a ton of information to convey. The podcast is going to be another avenue for us to do that. As we move forward through this, we're going to lay out some topics coming up in future podcasts. Today is just more of an introduction, but I know that we have already mapped out a series. We're going to start a series starting next month, focusing on the personal injury, specifically the auto accident side of things.
Right.
Why don't you walk us through that first series?
Yeah, so we're going to identify a couple of different things. One thing we're going to spend some time talking about is sort of the auto body repair industry. And, these are things that I myself have not given a lot of thought to, candidly. I will tell you, she will be unhappy with me for saying this, this weekend my wife backed her car out of our garage and hit my car, which was parked out in the driveway. It turns out that was my fault for parking the car in the driveway.
Then I'm compelled to ask, is she okay?
She's okay.
Okay.
My car is not okay. And so, it's one of those things that hit home for me this weekend is I've got to take my car in to get fixed. And so I'm having to make decisions about where to take it. And I know where I'm going to take it. And once we get into that podcast, I think, people will get a very good idea of why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I think tuning in for that kind of thing to have a better knowledge base about how the auto repair industry works is really going to be something that is impactful to people, because I'll tell you, what I have discovered is that every body shop is not the same. Every body shop is not the same. Every mechanic is not the same. These people in this industry have relationships with insurance companies that really will impact the kind of service you get. And
what we've learned is actually enlightening. I'm not going to spill the beans here.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you and I got
super
together.
Interesting.
Yeah, you and I got together after the fact, and we said, we never really thought about this, but it's a huge deal. And so I think going through that with a guy who's really knowledgeable about how that industry works is going to be beneficial for people. It's going to help people make better decisions about where to get their car worked on.
And fair statement, he probably has a better podcast than we do.
He probably does.
You mentioned this a second ago, which I think is important, is the insurance that you buy long before you ever have an accident. Maybe the most important thing you can ever do to address when you do have an accident is what product you buy in the way of auto insurance.
Yeah, and so what we're going to do is bring on an insurance agent who's really knowledgeable about that field. Someone who sits down with people every day as part of his job, explaining the ins and outs of what's in an insurance policy and what people should give some thought to buying. I just don't think people have a real appreciation for how important it is to make good decisions when you're buying your auto policy. Here's the thing. I know buying stuff online is easy. I know it saves some time. But when you need a good auto insurance policy, you need a good auto insurance policy. And the time to figure out what's in your policy is not after you've already had a wreck, right? Then it's too late. So I think it is beneficial to spend a little bit of time with an insurance agent, someone who's sitting down across the table from you, who can explain what's in a policy, who can explain, what you need to be thinking about when you buy an insurance policy. I know not everyone has the time to do that. So my hope is with this podcast, people can listen to that conversation we're having with that agent and get some of that information that they probably need to know. And it's and information they're not going to get if they're just going online to buy an insurance policy. And
how many times have we had to explain to somebody that it's not just the policy limits within the contract itself, but there are legal ramifications of what you can and can't claim, depending on what policy you buy.
Depending on what you buy.
So we're going to cover it from the beginning, all the way from what kind of insurance should you be purchasing to begin with. An accident happens, where do you go for personal damage to the car? We're going to address that. We're going to go all the way through if you've been injured, how to treat that, the medical side of things and the legal side of things. Walk them all the way through how we get these cases resolved.
Yeah, and I think people can certainly listen to, and I would strongly recommend that you listen to every single version of the podcast, every single interview.
Self-serving, but yes.
Self-serving. I understand people may not do that, but I do think if you're thinking about renewing your auto insurance in the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, listening to that podcast with the insurance agent is going to be helpful to you.
Absolutely.
If you're in the middle of an auto accident, you're in the middle of getting medical treatment, listening to someone who treats people frequently who've been in auto accidents probably can be helpful to you. So I think you're going to be able to find different things in this podcast series that are going to be beneficial to you depending upon sort of what's going on in your life and where you're at.
Well, and I think people will have a more realistic understanding and expectation that, they see advertising all the time. I won $300,000.
Yeah.
What they don't understand is that's not money in your pocket at the end of the day.
Yeah.
There are medical liens. We're going to talk about that. And the net in pocket, it can be vastly different. Half of the attorney's job is to get the money in the door. The other half of the attorney's job is how much can we keep for the client.
Yeah, how much the client actually walks away with in pockets.
Right.
And, as a firm that runs a lot of TV advertising, I probably shouldn't say this, but it's the truth. I mean, if you're making decisions about which lawyer you're going to hire based upon who has the flashiest ad or how many times you see that person's ad on TV, that's probably not the best way to make that decision. I think in this era of lawyer advertising where it's so prevalent, where it's, you can't watch daytime TV without seeing a lawyer ad. My hope is that this avenue is going to be a little bit more informative avenue for people, to enable people to maybe make some better decisions about how they're going to select an attorney, not just based upon, the TV. And like you were saying, those ads were, so-and-so got me $300,000, which may or may not be true or accurate in the first place.
That's right. And I'll just say I'm excited about the podcast. I think it's going to give people an opportunity maybe to get to know us a little better and hear more information in a different format. We're going to talk about that series, several episodes in the podcast dealing with the auto accident. We have another series where we're going to talk about industrial accidents and workers' compensation, how to handle those claims through a series. We're going to have a series talking about premises liability and products liability. We have a lot of information to convey, a lot to talk about.
And I'll tell you, I think the work comp one is going to be important because work comp is one of those systems where people can understandably be a little bit worried about going to talk to a lawyer, right? I mean, I know you do a lot of work comp work, Todd. I know you talk to people every day who've been in work accidents. I know one of the things you hear so frequently is, I'm worried about hiring a lawyer because I'm worried about what my employer is going to do about it. I think there again, the podcast is going to be a good way for people to get work comp information without having to, right off the bat, take the step of hiring a lawyer. Right. They may hear the information and it may dawn on them, geez, I need a lawyer. I mean,
certainly. That could more often than not they do.
Yeah, that could very well happen. But I think the podcast is going to be a good avenue for people to get some of that preliminary information without necessarily needing to take, the step of going to somebody's office.
And it is one of those areas that can spiral off into other areas of practice, other areas of law. Some, in fact, that we don't even do.
Yeah.
But becoming aware of those issues, one of the biggest mistakes you make in the work comp is to not file anything.
Yeah.
And then find out later that you've made a legal mistake or a medical mistake and then have to try and regroup that case from the beginning.
Yeah, right. If you've just been hurt at work, the Work Comp podcast is something you want to listen to because it's not
right away.
Yeah, because it's not a matter of, it's important enough that people should know. I think we should go ahead and just give that now. People don't necessarily need to wait for the Work Comp podcast. It's not a matter of weeks or months that you have to do something after a work comp injury. It's a matter of days.
That's right.
You need to get something done within a matter of days. And in fact, generally speaking, you need to do something within
10 days.
Yeah, 10 days.
Sometimes it's 10 days. It's as short as 10 days. And trust me, during that 10 days, no one else is out there reminding you or looking after your timeline or your interests. So you have to act fairly quickly, or you can the whole case can be out of reach. It can be gone, time barred if you're not careful.
So yeah, listen to the Work Comp podcast. But if something happens between now and when that airs, you've got 10 days.
Don't wait on us to get to that topic.
Yeah.
Consultations are always free at the accident recovery team, so you can call and speak to one of us directly at any time, and not have to wait for the topic to come up on the podcast or wait for a question to come up on our Friday Facebook frequently asked questions.
Yeah.
Call, get a free consultation, talk to us right away if you have any questions. Now, the premises liability, products liability, medical malpractice, sometimes that comes up, and we deal with that too, right?
Yeah, and I think we're gonna have a podcast version on that. That's a hard area of law. Those are complex cases. They are sometimes hard cases to win. and they're cases that take an extended period of time. And I think
a little bit of our money.
They're expensive cases. Yeah, let's not kid anybody. They're expensive cases. And so for all those reasons, they're hard. And I think dedicating a podcast, a version of the podcast to that, will probably give people who are in that predicament sort of a good basis for understanding what they need to be doing next.
So now sometimes you and I'll be here. Sometimes Gary Albin will probably be in with us. Sometimes Drew Stedman will be in with us.
Or sometimes just one of us.
Sometimes just one of us will be here.
Yeah.
But the point is, once a month, moving forward, we're going to have our monthly podcast and address all of these things. I encourage everybody to listen in. There is going to be some great information to be had and available for you.
And let's say this: if you've been listening now for the last however long this has been going on, and you're bored to death, I bet these are going to get better.
Oh, for sure.
As we do them,
this
right?
is our first time.
Yeah, I know. They're going to get better.
They got to get better.
Yeah. I mean, maybe, I don't know. I think we need some music. I think we need theme music.
I'll work on that.
Since you're the grandfather of the podcast, I'm going to put that on you.
I'll work on an intro, theme music, and we'll see what we can do to liven things up. I do agree with you. I think it's going to get better as we go. I'm excited about it. I don't know where we are on time, but I think for our first podcast, we've at least laid out the plan. I want people to kind of know where we're headed. We are excited about it. I think you're going to feel our excitement as it moves forward, because the folks that we're going to have in and chat with you on some of these topics are also excited about being here and being involved. So the future looks great. Please be a part of it with us. And I think we're going to wrap up the podcast, Sean, unless you have something else.
No, I would just invite people that if they have any questions, in advance of the podcast coming out that they want to listen to, they can always just call. It doesn't cost anything to come in and talk to one of us. It doesn't cost anything to call the firm and ask a question. If you hear a podcast and, maybe your question didn't get answered as directly as you'd like it to, absolutely call the firm, talk to one of our attorneys up here, and we can get your question answered for you.
Sounds good. We're going to wrap up the podcast. We will see you folks, or not see you, I suppose. You will hear us again next month. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. The lawyers of the Accident Recovery Team are licensed in Kansas and Kansas only. If you are unfortunate enough to live somewhere other than the great state of Kansas and have questions about an auto accident or an injury accident of any kind, you can still call the Accident Recovery Team, and we can partner with an attorney in your state to help you get the representation you need. The Accident Recovery Team can be found at 267team.com or by calling 1-866-267-TEAM.